I want to give you just some quick tips for getting sharper photos with any lens and any camera. Now, I think it's pretty clear that I have a love affair with prime lenses. They're a really cheap, affordable way to get sharper, better quality images, especially in low light, because they have apertures that open up nice and wide and let in a lot of light. I've talked about those before in other videos. But this one, across the board, how can you get the absolute sharpest images? I've got 5 quick tips for you. The first is don't shoot wide open. Now, wide open is kind of slang or jargon for talking about your aperture on your camera in your lens. Wide open means shooting at the widest available aperture to you for that lens at that focal length, because some lenses change the widest aperture available to you as you zoom. The kit lens is a great example of that. When you start shooting at 18, your widest aperture available to you is a 3.5. As you zoom up to 55, your widest aperture available to you is a 5.6. That's pretty much true on all kind of standard kit lenses across the board. Canon, Nikon, Sony. A prime lens, though, is going to allow you to have a fixed focal length and a fixed maximum aperture, and that is usually much wider. There are some zooms that also offer a fixed aperture. But at those widest apertures, very few lenses perform as well as they do if you stop down a little bit, close down from the maximum aperture. Most lenses perform best between 5.6 and 9. Somewhere in there is usually a lens's what they call sweet spot, where you're going to get the sharpest quality images out of it. Note that many of these lenses go far above f9. They'll go all the way up to f22, f32. That does not increase the sharpness of your images, and in fact they start to decrease because of diffraction. It's kind of like if you squeeze your fingers and leave just a little bit of a hole here to look through, you'll notice that it's very blurry around the edge there as that diffraction of the light comes through that small opening. That's the same. So f5.6 to f9. Shoot in that range to get the absolute sharpest pictures. 2. This is something I've talked about before. Keep your shutter speed higher than your focal length of the lens. Otherwise, you're going to end up with softer images due to blur from handshake. Now, if you have image stabilization, you can cheat this a little bit, but it's still a good rule of thumb to move by. I'm going to combine 2 of these tips into one and say that you also want to watch out that your shutter speed is high enough to freeze any moving subjects. If we're trying to get sharp pictures, we want our subjects to be frozen and crisp detail. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to watch my shutter speed video to get an idea where I do a lot of jumping jacks and give you an idea of when things start to get blurry at different shutter speeds. So a link down below to that. Tip number 3. Use your center focus point. Now, you have control over which point the camera uses to decide what to focus on, or you can let the camera decide. And sometimes when you let the camera decide, it is not choosing the best point. If you use your center focus point, you know exactly where you're focusing. That subject is going to be in crisp focus. So you decide, not the camera. Tip number 4. If you're using a tripod, you want to actually turn image stabilization off. I should say if you're using a tripod and an image stabilized lens, turn it off. There's this kind of weird feedback loop that happens, and you are likely to cause blurriness in your images if you have image stabilization on. If you say, I've never seen this and always left image stabilization on, you've probably been shooting at shutter speeds fast enough. But trust me, I've heard from enough people, I've seen it myself, eventually you're going to get a soft image and it's going to happen when it really counts. So turn image stabilization off every time you put the camera on a tripod. And finally, tip number 5, keep your ISO low. The higher the ISO, the more noise in the image. More noise, the appearance of clarity and sharpness is going to decrease and your image is going to look softer. So how do you keep your ISO low and stay in that sweet spot? Well, it becomes really tricky. But one of the things that I've noticed a lot of folks do is they don't take time to move their subjects just a little bit closer to better light. In this case, I'm filming this in this room. I've got beautiful light coming in from the window. If I was going to photograph somebody, I would make sure I'm doing it over here. I would take a half a second or two to say, step this way, then you're going to have them in much better light. Same thing happens outside. And in a variety of circumstances, look for the good light and take a moment so that you can have the better light, keep your ISO low, shoot in that sweet spot, and you're going to have sharper images. So these were just a couple of quick tips. If you have some tips on how to get sharper images, I'd love to hear them. You can leave a comment down below or come over and find me on Facebook. If you have any questions at all, leave a question, find me on Facebook, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.